Welcome to today's session. We will be covering employment responsibilities and rights. You will be learning about your statutory rights and responsibilities as an employee, your employer's rights and responsibilities, how ways of working are agreed. In order to understand rights and responsibilities in the workplace, it's useful to think about the definition of rights and responsibilities in the outside world. A right is a freedom or something you're entitled to. In the UK, we have lots of rights and freedoms, and we can live our lives according to our preferences. So, for example, we have rights like these: freedom of speech, freedom to practice religion, and freedom of association. We all have rights, but with them come responsibilities. A responsibility is a duty or something you should do. Therefore, we have the right to free speech, but a duty not to offend people. We have the right to choose a religion, but a responsibility to respect the religious choices of others. In many cases, we have the freedom to choose things, but the duty to act responsibly. And there are laws to ensure that we do the right thing. So when we talk about rights and responsibilities in a work context, a right is an entitlement and a responsibility is a duty. Remember, rights and responsibilities are a two-way street in the working world. Both the employee and the employer have rights and responsibilities. In order to clarify and unify rights and responsibilities in the workplace, there are many laws that have been passed, but we will investigate these laws later. Let's start to look at what it means to you to have rights in the workplace. One of the rights that you will already have experience of is the right to be kept safe. Health and safety regulations mean that your employer is legally required to protect you from harm. It is their responsibility to ensure your right to protection. I'm sure that you already know from your experiences at work in the depot that you will also have a responsibility to abide by health and safety procedures. Simply put, you have the right to be protected, your employer has a duty of care, and you have a responsibility to abide by the policy too. It's a two-way street. Now we have a working definition of rights and responsibilities. Let's investigate how legislation makes sure that things happen. Laws are very complex. They can sometimes take years to be formulated and to be passed, and are subject to reviews and changes quite often. Although some of us can be quite ambivalent about laws, most of us can think of a law or two that we'd like to change. The fact is, however, that the laws surrounding employment are protecting you right now. Your experience of working life will be very different without legislation, and you will be vulnerable to injury and unfair treatment. Let's take an overview of employment law and how it looks when it's put into practice. First of all, we must remember that these laws were put together by a consultative process between our government and the EU. Your company has a legal responsibility to abide by employment laws. Failure to abide by these laws is punishable. A company that is found breaking employment law can find themselves in court. Court cases and fines are financially draining, and prosecution can destroy a company's reputation. After you were offered your job, you were sent a contract to read and sign. Your contract of employment is a legal requirement. It is a document of agreement between you and your employer and is the basis of employment. The terms of your contract will officially let you know your job title, your salary, your probation period, your holiday entitlement, your hours of work. Once you have signed your contract, it becomes a binding agreement, which means that you and your employer are required to stick to it until it ends. When you wish to book annual leave or need to take time off for sickness, it's important that you follow your company guidelines. You will find these in your handbook or on your depot link by asking your line manager or the HR department. Please make sure that you follow the protocols when notifying your employer that you are unwell or unable to attend work. If you need to clarify this process, please ask your line manager. A day off sick that is not reported correctly can lead to an AWOL or an absence without leave, and in turn could lead to disciplinary action. When you return to work after a short period of illness, your manager will have a return to work interview with you. This is a process to establish the reason for your absence and to check that you are fit to return to work. During this meeting, you will be asked to fill in a self-certification form. Your self-certification form will be kept in your personnel file. It is a short form and requires you to give details of your illness. For periods of extended absence, your GP might give you a certificate or a sick note. The sick note is sometimes referred to as a fit note, and it must be kept safe and dropped into your depot as soon as possible, as it indicates the length of time you will be away from work or signed off sick. When we are feeling unwell, it's sometimes easy to neglect detail, but please remember that a sick note is a really important document, so if possible, make a copy of it and make sure it's delivered safely to your depot. There are other occasions and life events when you will be entitled to have leave. Having or adopting a baby will give you the right to maternity or paternity leave. Compassionate leave will be granted if you experience a life event, such as death of a close relative. The amount of leave that is allowed will be detailed in your company handbook, but if in doubt, please ask your line manager or your HR department. You will have noticed that your contract is very specific about how many days of holiday you have each year. It is your right to have scheduled time off work and your employer's responsibility to provide these days. Holiday time safeguards your welfare and ensures that the workforce is not overworked. Thinking back to your contract, you'll remember that one of the terms specified is how many hours you will work each week. For you, it is 40 hours. There is a piece of legislation or law called the Working Time Directive. It was passed in 1988. This law ensures that you are not required to work for more than 48 hours a week. The law also stipulates minimum rest breaks. This is an interesting regulation because certain types of worker, for example doctor, can decide to opt out of it. This opt-out has to be done in writing and the employer cannot demand it. Remember, if you are under 18, the law is very specific and says that you must not work for more than 8 hours a day and no more than 48 hours in a week. You have the right to be treated fairly and your employer has a responsibility to adhere to legislation to protect you from discrimination. As you might have guessed, there is a law that regulates this, the Equality Act of 2010. The law is very clear that there must be no discrimination in the workplace. It specifies exactly what types of people should be protected from discrimination. Discrimination on the grounds of age, disability, gender and gender reassignment, sexual orientation, marital or civil status, pregnancy and motherhood, race, religion and belief is illegal. Remember, it's not just your employer that has to prevent discrimination. You have a part to play in making sure that the workplace is tolerant and fair. As an employee, you have the right to be protected from physical harm, and your employer has a statutory means legal, responsibility to keep you safe. You should be familiar with the Health and Safety Law poster. There will be one in your place of work. Do you know whereabouts in your depot this poster is displayed? Employers have a legal duty to display the approved poster in a prominent position in each workplace. Here is a guided tour of the poster. This part of the poster tells you that workers have rights and a right to work in places where risks to their health and safety are properly controlled. It also reminds you that your employer is responsible for health and safety, but you must also help. This part of the poster tells you what employers must do for you. They must decide what could harm you in your job and take precautions to stop it. This is part of risk assessment. They must consult and work with you and your health and safety representatives in protecting everyone from harm in the workplace. They must give you health and safety training that you need to do your job. They must provide you with any equipment and protective clothing that you need and ensure that it is properly looked after. And they also must provide you with toilets, washing facilities, and drinking water. This part of the poster says that your employer has to have first aid facilities. It informs you how to report major injuries and fatalities at work. It also tells you that your employer needs insurance that covers you, and it also tells you that your employer must display a copy of the insurance certificate at work. This part of the poster outlines the responsibilities that you have. You have a responsibility to follow the training you have received when using any work items your employer has given you. You have the responsibility to take reasonable care of your own and other people's health and safety. You have to cooperate with your employer on health and safety. And also you have to tell someone if you think that workplace is inadequate or there are not enough precautions to safeguard people's health and safety. This part of the poster tells you what to do if you encounter a problem. It informs you that if you are worried about health and safety in your workplace, talk to your employer, supervisor, or health and safety representative. You can also look at the HSE website for general information about health and safety at work. In 1974, an Act of Parliament was passed called the Health and Safety at Work Act. These laws are the ones that your employer uses to keep you safe. You will know by now that your employer carries out risk assessments to minimise your risks at work. They are systematic ways of evaluating possible dangers involved in an activity or in the place of work. Risk assessments are essential to help your employer take reasonable steps to prevent harm. Your company is obliged by law to keep copies of the risk assessments. The purpose of a risk assessment is not to create lots of paperwork and administration, but it is to identify hazards, decide who might be harmed and how, evaluate the risk, decide on precautions, and record significant findings. So, your employer is constantly assessing risks to keep you safe, but that's not the end of the story. You have a responsibility too. During your working day, you may encounter situations when you will have to exercise your own judgment and take action if you see a potential hazard. This is known as a dynamic risk assessment, which simply means that you take notice and correct risks as you go along. As you get more experienced in the depot, you will easily notice when things might be getting a bit risky. For example, you may notice some stock overhanging in the warehouse. Please be aware of your own limitations about fixing a potential risk. Never attempt to correct something and end up putting yourself at risk of injury. If you have any doubt, it's essential that you seek help from your co-workers. If the risk is serious, you must report it to your manager. Remember, We all have a responsibility to keep our workplace safe. A hazard or risk that occurs in your area of responsibility must never be ignored or left for somebody else to notice. Now we have looked at safety, let's look at your employer's statutory obligation regarding the health of their employees. Of particular relevance to your work in the depot is how the handling of stock has to be managed. And so we move on to another piece of legislation, the Manual Handling Operations Regulations 1992. A wide range of manual handling is covered by this law: lifting, lowering, pushing, pulling, and carrying. Your company assesses the risks associated with the type of lifting and handling that you do in your depot. They have to examine and maintain your depot's pump trucks, forklifts, and sack trucks to make sure they are safe. In order to prevent accidents, all employees have to be adequately trained and assessed before they can even use this equipment. Lifting without mechanical aids is also covered by the law, and your employer has to manage this too to keep you safe from physical harm. Take a look at the picture which illustrates the guidelines for safe lifting. You will notice that the weights considered safe to lift are different depending on how high you're lifting. Remember, these are only guidelines. Some people are stronger than others, and so it's essential that we all lift within our own ability. Take a look at the two-man lift image. You will have noticed that there are stickers like this and they appear on your heavier items. These are warnings and advice. It is essential that you take note of these stickers and plan your lifting accordingly. Remember, your employer is complying with their legal duties to keep you safe, but it's impossible to create a work environment that is 100% risk-free. Accidents will happen. And this leads us on to our next topic, which covers first aid in the workplace. Your employer has a legal responsibility to make sure that you can receive first aid if you have an accident at work. Naturally, there are legal regulations concerning this, the First Aid at Work Regulations 1981. Your employer has a statutory responsibility to have qualified first aiders in your depot, have a fully equipped and up-to-date first aid box, and have an accident book. Most accidents at work are small scale, but if something serious happens, your employer has a legal responsibility to report it to the Health and Safety Executive, or the HSE. The HSE is a body responsible for the encouragement, regulation and enforcement of workplace health, safety and welfare. As part of its work, the HSE investigates industrial accidents, small and large, including major incidents like explosions or fires. If you have a serious accident at work, your company is obliged by law to make sure the circumstances can be viewed by outside bodies. This is to prevent cover-ups. The law that covers this requirement is called the Reporting of Injuries, Diseases and Dangerous Occurrences 1998, also known as RIDDOR. Here is a short list of the type of injury that must be reported to the Health and Safety Executive. Fractures, but not fingers or toes. Amputations, which means the loss of a limb. Permanent loss or reduction of sight. Serious burns. And loss of consciousness caused by a head injury. Once a serious incident has taken place, your depot manager has to write a report and pass it to a more senior person in your company. From then on, a series of people will oversee it, and eventually it will be presented to the Health and Safety Executive. So that the information is not lost within your company, there is a strict reporting system that has to be agreed and followed. Because of the legislation surrounding employment law, the UK workforce is well protected. Your company has policies to ensure that they live up to their responsibilities And you can find these policies in your depot link, in your company handbook, or you can get copies directly from your HR department. If you have a particular interest in employment responsibilities and rights, there is lots of information on the Health and Safety Executive website. The Citizens Advice Bureau can also help you if you have any queries about how the law affects you, particularly if you feel that you have been subjected to a breach in the law. So here's a quick recap of the laws. The Equality Act. This ensures there is no discrimination at work. The Working Time Regulations Act. Make sure that you do not work too many hours. The Health and Safety at Work Act. Make sure that you are safe from injury at work. The Manual Handling Operations Regulations reduces the risk of personal injury. First Aid at Work Regulations. Make sure that you can receive first aid after an accident at work. Reporting of injuries, diseases and dangerous occurrences makes sure that the Health and Safety Executive is told about serious accidents in your workplace. Let's take another look at your contract now and how your employment rights are reflected in it. We've already learned that the number of hours you're allowed to work are governed by law, and your contract confirms that your hours, 40 per week, are legal. Your contract also lists your working entitlements, your starting salary, 24 days of holiday plus bank holidays, staff discount on products after you've worked there for 6 months, Simply Health plan, cooperative employee benefits including childcare vouchers, Vauxhall Partners scheme, and a pension scheme. Your contract is a legal document. It outlines the terms and conditions of your employment. It's a binding agreement between you and your employer, which has to be adhered to by both of you until your contract ends. We have a few moments to look at your payslip, as this is also a legal document and it's a good idea to be able to understand it. All payslips have to include your name, your national insurance number and your contributions, your tax code, which is how your tax deductions are calculated, your pay before and after tax, and details of sickness and holiday pay. Please keep your payslips carefully. It's a good idea to file them and keep them for 22 months. After that, you may decide to dispose of them by shredding to keep your personal data safe. We all hope that our working lives will run smoothly, but what happens if things go wrong? When you have a problem or a complaint, you have the responsibility to raise it quickly so that your employer can help you. And here is a short guide about how to report a grievance at work. Grievances are concerns, problems or complaints that are raised in an official way. Anybody may at some time have problems or concerns with their working conditions or their relationships with colleagues that they may wish to raise. Issues that may cause grievance include terms and conditions of employment, health and safety, work relations, bullying, harassment or discrimination, new working practices or organisational changes. It's really important to remember that you have protection at work and a process to report things that affect you. If you feel that you are subject to discrimination or bullying and harassment, you must speak to someone. If you are uncomfortable about taking your worries to your line manager, remember that you can go straight to HR with concerns of this nature. Here are the key points to help you if you think that you may wish to make an official statement of complaint about something at work. Employees should let the employer know the nature of the grievance and issues promptly. The employer and line manager should try to resolve any grievance informally in the first instance. Where this is not possible, employers should arrange a formal meeting as quickly as possible, and then should carry out any of the necessary investigations to establish the facts of the case. Employees can be accompanied at any formal meeting and have the right to appeal against any formal decision made. Your company's full grievance procedure can be found in your company handbook. As an employee, you have a responsibility to keep your personal information updated, and your employer has a responsibility to conform to the Data Protection Act. Remember that you must inform your employer if anything changes: your name, your address, including your email and telephone numbers, your qualifications, your next of kin for an emergency contact. Your employer stores information about you in your personnel file. The Data Protection Act means they have a legal responsibility to keep it safe and secure. Also, workers have a legal right to access information that an employer may hold on them. The Data Protection Act is concerned with respecting the rights of individuals when processing their personal information. This can be achieved by being open and honest with employees about the use of the information about them, and by following good data handling procedures. The Data Protection Act works on the following principles. Personal data should be processed fairly and lawfully. The data should be adequate, relevant, and not excessive. It should be accurate and, where necessary, kept up to date, and the data should always be kept secure. As an employee, you also have responsibilities to ensure that your activities comply with the data protection principles. Staff should not disclose personal data outside the organisation's procedures or use personal data held on others for their own purposes. Be particularly careful with the details of your customers and be responsible about how you deal with their account details and anything else that may expose them or their business to potential harm. We have now reached the end of our session about responsibilities and rights. We have covered your statutory rights and responsibilities, your employer's legal rights and responsibilities, and understanding how ways of working are agreed. We are now going to investigate ways that you will be able to progress through your apprenticeship and into the next stage of your career. As you will know, the apprenticeship programme you have joined is one of the most successful programmes in the UK. Business skills are pivotal to any organisation, and the success of every business relies on the skills of its employees. Your contract will have a job description, which is an agreed way of working between you and your employer. Your job description is specific to your role and contains the description of what your duties entail. The main purpose of your role is to obtain relevant experience and qualifications to meet the standards required by your company and to gain a permanent role within your depot. You know that during your apprenticeship, you will experience 4 key areas of your business and will work on the counter, in the warehouse, in business administration, and in business development. At the moment, you're an apprentice, and your company has an obligation to ensure that they give you the opportunity to complete your qualifications. Obviously, they take into account that you are still learning and recognise that your role as an apprentice means that initially you won't have the same level of experience, skills and knowledge as the other employees. However, your company still requires you to meet satisfactory levels of performance relevant to your role. Your company has a clear expectation of you whilst you are in your training. They expect you to add value to their business, to help it grow and become more commercial. By now, you will know the story of your company's history and be aware of its particular qualities and strategies that have made it successful. You will also know of some of these strategies and business plans. At depot level, for instance, you will be aware of targets and bonuses. You may even have your own personal targets and be encouraged to be accountable for the commerciality of your business. You will see the effort that your managers and your co-workers go to ensure that the company's vision is played out in every part of your working practices. You will see improvements in ways of working, sharpening a business strategy to improve profit, and you will have been part of the ongoing training that your company invests in to make their workforce efficient and professional. So, you'll have a really good perspective about what happens in your own company, its aims and its objectives. But it's important that you have a broader view. You need to make sure that you know about how your company fits into the sector as a whole. When putting together strategies, your company will be constantly making reference to the sector and planning accordingly. They will be constantly assessing competitors, predicting trends, and monitoring legislation and anything that affects the outcomes of the business. It's vital that you look out from within your depot walls and know how your company sits in the sector as a whole. You need to be aware of who your competitors are and how they are trading, innovations that will affect your customers' expectations, news stories that impact on the things that you sell, events that might make your customers feel differently about your sector, and economic and legal changes that may impact on your sector. As with all sectors, there will be public concerns relating to trade business. These concerns may be environmental, with issues such as noise, the siting of a warehouse, an access route, low carbon or weight restrictions for large goods vehicles. There may be concerns relating to costs or European directives and regulations and the impact this has on the public. As an employee, it's important that you are aware of any issue of public concern that may affect your organisation and the wider industry. For example, environmental issues and the low carbon agenda. Bear in mind that your sector is influenced by things that happen outside your company, and in particular there are representative bodies that can have a real impact on how your sector trades. For example, the Health and Safety Executive may issue guidelines that impact on your working practices. Trade unions can also influence your sector. A trade union is an organisation made up of members, mainly workers. A trade union's aim is to protect and advance the interests of workers. Unions negotiate agreements with employers, and this can sometimes lead to changes in the whole sector. So whether or not you are a member of a union, you may feel the influence of things that trade unions negotiate. These can be quite complex issues, but it's your responsibility to understand them. Take some time to talk with your managers or experienced co-workers and ask them about things that have affected your industry sector. You may well be surprised about how events in the outside world have impacted on your business, and the information you discover will give you a greater understanding of your industry as a whole. So we have established that as an apprentice, you are fulfilling a role in your company, as well as ensuring that you receive a qualification that will enable you to move ahead with your career. How many times will you change your career in your lifetime? It's likely that you will change jobs several times. The secret to successful transition from one job to another is to develop your underlying skills. These will be relevant whatever job you choose to do. As we develop professionally, it's a good idea to keep reviewing our skills and plan our career development. We hope that you are really enjoying your current job and feel really comfortable with your employer. Nevertheless, it's still worthwhile to think about your next steps and keep your mind open to opportunities to grow in the future. Career planning can help, and it's a habit that you should be getting into right now. In the next few months, you have a career plan all set out for you, as your apprenticeship is a planned scheme of training and learning. As you go through your courses, make a note of the things that really interest you, and if you see opportunities to advance in that area, make them part of your career plan. It's really good to keep your eyes and ears open and ask people about their jobs and how they achieve them. People love to talk about themselves, and so if you are genuinely interested and polite, they will be happy to share information and tips with you. Be curious, Have an open mind and try to imagine yourself in another job. Ask people what kinds of roles they can see you in and keep yourself up to date about developments in your industry, because being well informed is essential for a strong career plan. So, completing your apprenticeship is your short-term career plan. A career plan can be simple or as complicated as you like. When thinking about your future, it may be useful to follow the process in this diagram. Please look at number 1. Decide on a career move. Number 2. Look into the job thoroughly so that you can make sure it's what you really want to do. Speak to people who already have this job and do some research using the internet and looking at some trade journals. Number 3. Discover the skills that you need for the job. You can research this by looking at job adverts and investigating their requirements. Try the Job Centre website or other job search engines like Indeed. Number 4. Compare your qualifications and what is needed by the job or the career. Number 5. Develop a plan how to achieve your goal. If you need specific training, you may need to investigate pathways for that. Sector skill councils are a good starting point for this process. Number 6. Evaluate your progress and see how close you are to your goal. Development plans rarely follow a straight path, so don't be discouraged. Keep researching and investigating, and begin the process as often as you like. Remember, if you are intending to make your next career move inside your current company, you are very well placed for career advancement. Internal job vacancies will be available to view by everyone in your business. If you have never seen a list of vacancies, contact your HR department and they will tell you where this information is displayed. If you see a job that catches your imagination, simply follow the steps in the diagram. You'll be able to speak directly to your HR department to identify if you meet the criteria for a specific role. It's also really useful to be able to talk to your manager about career development. They'll be able to guide you and in some cases will be able to recommend routes into promotion or career changes within your company. Don't be shy about approaching your managers for help and guidance. They will see your ambitions in a positive way and may even be able to offer you specific internal training to help further your career. A great time to talk about your career plan is at your performance reviews. Make sure that you prepare yourself for your reviews and make it a priority to present a clear picture of your future plans and listen carefully to your manager's comments so that you can have a constructive discussion about your career development.